The hard truth about outgrowing people you love, is one of the quietest heartbreaks you will ever experience. There is no argument big enough to point to, no betrayal dramatic enough to justify the distance, no clear villain in the story. There is just a slow, uncomfortable realization that who you are becoming no longer fits where you once belonged. And that truth hurts in a way that grief often doesn't know how to name. Because how do you mourn someone who is still alive? How do you explain the ache of loving someone deeply while knowing you can no longer walk the same path? This is the hard truth no one prepares you for. Love alone is not always enough to keep people growing in the same direction. Outgrowing someone doesn't happen all at once. It happens in moments. Moments where conversations feel heavier than they used to. Moments where silence feels easier than explaining yourself. Moments where you start editing parts of who you are just to keep the peace. You don't wake up one day and decide to change. You evolve slowly, quietly, through experiences, lessons, pain, and growth. And sometimes the people you love don't evolve with you. The hardest part is that outgrowing someone doesn't mean you stop caring. You still remember the laughter, the shared history, the version of yourself that existed when they were close. And that memory keeps you questioning yourself. Am I being disloyal? Am I giving up too easily? Am I wrong for wanting more? But growth has a way of asking uncomfortable questions and refusing to be ignored. There is guilt in outgrowing people you love. Guilt for changing. Guilt for needing different things. Guilt for no longer being satisfied with dynamics that once felt safe. You may even try to shrink back into who you were. You tell yourself, I don't need to grow that much. You tell yourself, this is fine. I can adapt. You tell yourself, at least they're familiar. But growth doesn't work that way. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unfeel what no longer feels right. You cannot unsee the misalignment once it reveals itself. Outgrowing people often feels like betrayal, especially when they haven't done anything wrong. They didn't hurt you. They didn't leave you. They didn't intentionally hold you back. They just stayed the same. And staying the same is not a crime, but it can still create distance. Sometimes you outgrow people because your values shift. What once felt acceptable no longer does. What once felt normal now feels heavy. What once felt harmless now feels draining. You start craving depth where there is avoidance, honesty where there is defensiveness, growth where there is stagnation, and the gap between you grows wider not from conflict but from contrast. Outgrowing people also exposes how much effort you were carrying alone. You notice that you're always the one initiating growth conversations, always the one adjusting, always the one compromising, and one day you get tired, not angry, just tired. Tired of explaining yourself, tired of dimming your curiosity, tired of apologizing for becoming more aware. And that tiredness is not selfishness, it's information. One of the most painful truths about outgrowing people you love is realizing that staying would cost you yourself. You start to feel disconnected from your own truth. You feel like parts of you go unseen. You feel like you're living in an older version of your life. And slowly you begin to grieve, not just the relationship, but the future you imagined within it. Outgrowing someone doesn't mean they are beneath you. It doesn't mean you're superior. It doesn't mean they failed. It means you are on different timelines of becoming. And timelines don't always sync. No matter how much love exists, there is also fear in outgrowing people. Fear of loneliness. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear of starting over. Because outgrowing someone often means stepping into the unknown. It means releasing familiarity. It means letting go of history. It means trusting that alignment is worth the discomfort. And that trust doesn't come easily. Sometimes you try to bring people with you. You share your insights, your healing, your excitement about growth. And sometimes they meet you with resistance, mockery, or indifference. That hurts. Not because they disagree, but because they don't see you anymore. Outgrowing people teaches you that love does not always look like staying. Sometimes love looks like honesty. Sometimes love looks like distance. Sometimes love looks like letting someone remain who they are without forcing them to change. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to stop pretending the gap doesn't exist. There is grief in realizing that some people are meant for certain seasons, not lifetimes. They were right for who you were. They supported you when you needed it most. They helped shape you. And honoring that does not require clinging to them forever. Gratitude and release can coexist. Outgrowing people also reveals how deeply we fear being alone. We stay because leaving feels like failure. We stay because starting over feels exhausting. We stay because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. But safety that suffocates growth is not safety. It's stagnation. As you grow, you begin to notice misalignment more quickly. The conversations that once energized you now drain you. The dynamics that once felt playful now feel limiting. The expectations that once felt normal now feel confining. And you can't ignore that forever. One of the hardest moments is realizing that the person you love may never understand why you changed. They may see it as rejection. They may see it as arrogance. They may see it as abandonment. And you may never be able to fully explain it in a way that feels satisfying to them. That doesn't make you wrong, it makes the situation complex. Outgrowing people requires emotional maturity. It requires holding love and distance at the same time. It requires resisting the urge to villainize. It requires choosing integrity over comfort. It's easier to stay and resent, harder to leave with compassion. You may question whether you're being ungrateful. After all, they were there for you. They supported you once. They mattered, and they still do. But gratitude does not require lifelong self-abandonment. You can honor what was without sacrificing what is becoming. Outgrowing people often brings loneliness, not because you are alone, but because you are in transition. You are no longer who you were. You are not yet fully surrounded by those who align with who you are becoming. And that in-between space is uncomfortable, but it is temporary. Growth changes your tolerance. You tolerate less emotional immaturity, less avoidance, less stagnation, not because you think you're better, but because you've learned what it costs to ignore misalignment. Outgrowing people also forces you to confront a difficult truth about yourself. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to evolve beyond roles people are used to you playing. You are allowed to want different things. You are allowed to choose growth, even when it disappoints others. Sometimes outgrowing people doesn't result in a dramatic ending. There's no goodbye speech, no final conversation, just less contact, more space, a gradual fading. And that ambiguity can be painful, but it's often honest. You may grieve the simplicity of who you used to be together, the ease, the shared jokes, the comfort, but you also recognize that simplicity came at a cost, and you are no longer willing to pay it. Outgrowing people teaches you discernment. Not everyone who loves you can walk with you forever. Not everyone who knows you deserves continued access. Not everyone who mattered will continue to matter in the same way. And that does not erase what they meant. As you continue growing, you begin to value alignment over attachment. You choose relationships that expand you, not restrict you. You choose conversations that challenge you, not diminish you. You choose environments that support growth, not fear it. And this choice is not loud. It's intentional. There will be moments when you miss them, when you wonder if growth was worth the distance, when you wish things could be both comfortable and aligned. And in those moments you remind yourself, growth always asks something of you. Outgrowing people you love is not a sign that you failed at loving them. It's a sign that you are honoring your evolution. And evolution rarely happens without loss. You don't stop loving them. You just stop living in places that no longer fit. And as you continue forward, navigating guilt, grief, relief, and growth all at once, you begin to understand that this process is not about becoming colder or distant, but about becoming more honest, more aligned, more rooted in who you are becoming. And this understanding unfolds slowly, through difficult conversations you don't have, through boundaries you quietly maintain, through choices that prioritize your growth even when they hurt. And as you keep walking this path, learning to hold love without attachment, and gratitude without obligation, this story continues, revealing deeper layers of truth about connection, identity, and courage, and what it truly means to grow, not away from love, but toward yourself. And as that continuation unfolds, you begin to notice that outgrowing people doesn't just change your relationships with them, it changes your relationship with yourself. You become more honest about what drains you and what nourishes you. You stop forcing yourself into spaces where you must constantly translate who you are becoming. You start listening more closely to the quiet signals inside you that once went ignored. You realize that growth is not loud. It doesn't always announce itself with big decisions. Sometimes it shows up as discomfort, as restlessness, as a subtle knowing that something no longer fits, and that knowing is difficult to honor when it involves people you love. Outgrowing someone often comes with an invisible mourning. You mourn who you were together. You mourn the future you once imagined. You mourn the ease of connection before growth complicated it. And because nothing bad happened, you feel like you don't have permission to grieve. But loss doesn't need conflict to be real. You are allowed to grieve relationships that didn't end but changed. There's also a strange relief that comes with outgrowing people. Relief from constant self-editing. Relief from holding back questions. Relief from minimizing your curiosity, your depth, your desire for more. And that relief can bring guilt. You wonder if feeling lighter means you didn't care enough. But caring and choosing yourself are not opposites. As you grow, you begin to notice that some relationships were built on versions of you that no longer exist. The people pleaser, the peacekeeper, the one who stayed silent to keep harmony. When you stop playing those roles, the relationship changes or ends. And that shift reveals how much of the connection depended on your self-sacrifice. Outgrowing people forces you to confront how much you've normalized emotional imbalance. How often you adjusted your expectations instead of expressing them. How often you lowered your needs instead of honoring them. How often you stayed quiet instead of being honest. Growth asks you to stop doing that. And not everyone will be comfortable with the version of you who no longer overextends. You may notice resistance. People questioning, people joking about your boundaries. People subtly trying to pull you back into familiar patterns. This resistance isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's fear. Fear of losing access. Fear of being left behind. Fear of having to reflect on their own stagnation. But fear does not get to dictate your growth. Outgrowing people also teaches you how to sit with discomfort without fixing it. You don't rush to explain yourself anymore. You don't rush to smooth things over. You allow distance to exist without panicking. This is not avoidance. It is emotional regulation. You start to trust that alignment doesn't need to be forced. The people who can grow with you will adjust. The people who can't will drift. And both outcomes are information. Sometimes you'll look back and wonder if you should have tried harder, if you could have been more patient, if you could have stayed quieter. But then you remember how much effort you already gave, how much you compromised, how much you hoped things would change. And you realize that trying harder would have meant abandoning yourself. Outgrowing people also sharpens your discernment around reciprocity. You become aware of who asks about your growth, and who avoids it, who celebrates your evolution and who feels threatened by it, who meets you with curiosity, and who meets you with judgment. And you start choosing your proximity accordingly. You may also discover that outgrowing people brings unexpected space into your life. Space in your schedule, space in your mind, space in your heart. At first that space feels empty, but over time it becomes fertile ground for new connections, for deeper alignment, for parts of yourself that had no room to exist before. Growth has a way of attracting people who resonate with who you are now, not who you used to be. Conversations feel easier. Understanding feels mutual. You don't have to explain why growth matters to you, it's assumed. And when you experience that, you understand why the separation was necessary. Outgrowing people also requires forgiving yourself for staying as long as you did. You stayed because you loved them, because you hoped, because you didn't yet know what misalignment felt like. There is no shame in that. Learning often requires time. You also learn that not all relationships are meant to be carried forward unchanged. Some evolve into something lighter. Some become distant but respectful. Some fade entirely. And allowing that evolution is part of emotional maturity. There will be moments when you wish you could bring everyone with you. When you wish growth didn't require distance. When you wish love alone could bridge every gap. But the truth is, growth changes you. And change reshapes your world. Outgrowing people teaches you how to hold love without possession. You learn to wish people well without staying close, to honor history without repeating it, to care without clinging. This is not coldness. It is wisdom. You begin to understand that alignment is not about agreement on everything. It's about shared values, shared curiosity, shared willingness to grow. When those things are missing, love alone struggles to sustain connection. As you continue walking this path, you realize that outgrowing people is not something you do to them. It is something that happens within you. And your responsibility is not to stay the same for the sake of comfort, but to remain honest with who you are becoming. This honesty will cost you some connections, but it will also save you from living a life that no longer feels like your own. And that trade, painful as it is necessary. And as this realization settles, you stop resisting the process. You stop labeling growth as selfish. You stop apologizing for evolving. You stop negotiating with misalignment. You accept that some chapters end not because love failed, but because growth continued. And this acceptance doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds slowly, through moments of clarity, through choices that prioritize truth over familiarity, through the quiet courage it takes to walk forward without dragging the past with you. And as you keep moving, learning to hold grief and gratitude at the same time, learning to trust that alignment will find you again in new forms. This story keeps unfolding, revealing deeper truths about connection, identity, and the courage it takes to let go of people you love in order to become who you are meant to be continued. Continue. And in that unfolding, something inside you begins to settle, not because the loss no longer hurts, but because you stop fighting the truth of it. You stop trying to convince yourself that growth should feel painless, that evolution should come without consequence. You begin to accept that becoming more of who you are will naturally create distance from who you were, and from those who only knew you in that earlier form. You start to understand that outgrowing people is not an act of rejection, it is an act of recognition. Recognition of what no longer aligns. Recognition of what drains instead of nourishes. Recognition of what asks you to stay small in order to stay connected. And once you recognize these things, pretending not to see them becomes its own kind of pain. Outgrowing people teaches you how to sit with mixed emotions. You can feel love and sadness at the same time. You can feel gratitude and grief in the same breath. You can miss someone and still know that reconnecting would cost you too much. This emotional complexity is not confusion. It is maturity. It means you are no longer forcing feelings into simple categories, just to make decisions easier. You also begin to see how much courage it takes to grow without applause. There is no celebration for choosing alignment over familiarity, no reward for choosing integrity over comfort, no recognition for walking away quietly instead of dramatically. Most of the time, growth is lonely, and loneliness can make you question your choices. But loneliness is not proof that you are wrong. Often it is proof that you are transitioning. As you continue to evolve, you become more comfortable with letting relationships change shape. Not everything has to be all or nothing. Not every connection has to be severed completely. Some people move from the center of your life to the edges, and that shift is not cruelty, it's honesty. You may also notice that outgrowing people sharpens your sense of responsibility. You stop blaming others for not changing. You stop expecting them to meet you where they cannot. You understand that everyone grows at their own pace. And sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is stop demanding that someone become different for your sake. Outgrowing people also means learning how to hold boundaries without resentment. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. You don't need to justify your distance. You don't need to convince anyone that your growth is valid. Your life does not require consensus. There will be moments when old connections resurface. A message, a memory, a familiar laugh that reminds you of who you once were. And for a moment you may wonder if the distance was necessary. But then you remember the parts of yourself you had to silence to stay, and the question answers itself. Growth has a way of revealing what you can no longer tolerate, not because you've become rigid, but because you've become aware. You are aware of how precious your energy is, how limited your time is, how costly misalignment can be, and with that awareness comes discernment. Outgrowing people also changes how you form new relationships. You no longer bond over shared wounds alone. You no longer confuse familiarity with compatibility. You no longer rush intimacy to fill gaps left behind. You move slower. You observe more. You choose with intention. And this intention protects what you are becoming. You may also realize that some people will remember you as the version of you that no longer exists. They will speak to who you were, not who you are. They will expect the same access, the same role, the same availability. And when you don't show up that way, they may feel confused or hurt. But growth does not require you to stay recognizable to everyone. It requires you to stay honest with yourself. Outgrowing people teaches you how to let go without bitterness. You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to rewrite the past. You don't need to prove that leaving was justified. You let go quietly, trusting that alignment will speak for itself. There is a deep kind of strength that comes from choosing yourself without making anyone the enemy, from acknowledging love without attachment, from honoring history without obligation. This is not detachment, it is balance. As you keep moving forward, you begin to feel more at home within yourself. You no longer question every instinct. You no longer override your needs to maintain connection. You no longer feel guilty for wanting more depth, more honesty, more growth. You realize that wanting more is not dissatisfaction, it is direction. Outgrowing people also teaches you patience with life. You stop rushing to replace what you lost. You stop forcing new connections to fill old spaces. You allow yourself to exist in the in-between. And the in-between, while uncomfortable, is where clarity forms. You start to trust that the right people will meet you where you are. Not because you demand it, but because alignment recognizes alignment. And when that happens, relationships feel less like work and more like resonance. You also learn that outgrowing people does not make you ungrateful. Gratitude is not measured by how long you stay. It is measured by how deeply you honor what was. You can be thankful and still move on. As this chapter continues, you stop framing outgrowing people as loss alone. You see it as refinement, a narrowing of what matters, a deepening of self-trust, a commitment to living truthfully. And even though there are days when the distance aches, when memory feels heavy, when growth feels isolating, you keep going, because you know what it costs to go backward, and you know what it offers to move forward. You are not becoming someone who loves less. You are becoming someone who loves with clarity, someone who understands that love without alignment leads to resentment, that connection without growth leads to stagnation, that staying without honesty leads to self-betrayal. And as you continue to walk this path, holding grief without drowning in it, holding love without clinging to it, holding growth without apology, you understand that outgrowing people you love is not the end of connection, but the beginning of living in integrity with who you are becoming. And this understanding does not close the story, it opens it. Because as long as you continue to grow, to listen, to choose alignment over familiarity, this journey will keep unfolding, revealing new depths, new connections, new versions of yourself, each shaped by the courage it took to let go of who you once were, and the people who could not walk with you into who you are becoming. And now the ending is quiet. There is no dramatic goodbye, no final speech that ties everything together, no moment where everyone understands your choice. There is just acceptance. Acceptance that some people were meant to walk with you only part of the way. Acceptance that love can exist without permanence. Acceptance that growth will always ask you to release something in order to receive something else. You look back with gratitude, not regret. You honor what was without wishing it had stayed. You allow the distance to exist without filling it with guilt. And most importantly, you stop questioning yourself. You stop asking if you were wrong to change. You stop wondering if you should have stayed smaller. You stop measuring your growth by who could keep up. You understand now that outgrowing people you love was never a failure of connection, it was a reflection of your evolution. You did not leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started listening to your needs, your values, your truth, and that listening led you here, at peace with the choice, at peace with the loss, at peace with yourself. This is where the story ends, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with integrity, with the quiet strength of someone who chose to become who they were meant to be, even when it meant letting go of people they loved. And in that choice, you didn't lose love. You learned how to honor it without losing yourself.